Welcome to a very special presentation of Lakengren's Reserve Study. I'm Jeff Lane from the Lakengren Board, and as you may know, earlier this year a study was done that takes into account our assets here in Lakengren, all of our assets, and divides them into 5 categories: our pool, our roads, our lakes, our waste management, and capital improvements. It was a big study, a thick study. It was more than 200 pages long, and it was a lot to digest. The study sets a schedule and a timeline and explains the costs of how we'll need to replace these assets. Now, behind me is Lakengren Drive. 3,400 cars pass behind me every single day. This is a drainage tile that passes underneath it, and this tile is failing. This is the inside of that tile, and as you can see, when the water comes up, instead of passing through the tile, it goes through these holes that have been created underneath into the ground, washing out the base. Replacement of assets like these need to be planned so that we don't face unexpected assessments and expenses. So give us just a minute and we'll take you around Lakengren and show you some of these elements, and we'll begin with our roads. And to tell you about that is Finance Committee member Rick McMahon.
Road maintenance is the largest single budgetary item Lakengren faces. Virtually every study that's been done on infrastructure, there's a direct correlation between infrastructure spending and increased home values. When the roads are properly funded, we save money by being able to receive better pricing, by being able to do larger projects at one time. The reserve study recommended $420,000 in paving for some streets on the west side of the lake in the next 2 years. It also includes $125,000 for east side repairs in 2023. Also included in the road section of the study is the cost of maintaining our culverts, 106 of them, along with our bridges like this one over the spillway where there's been surface loss and rusting. The study noted cracking in most of the roads and failure on their edges that will be addressed through chip and sealing and eventually complete reconstruction to install a proper base. Lakengren has roughly 26 miles of roadway. And now to talk about the capital improvements is Alex Larson.
Thanks, Rick. There are a lot of components to capital improvements. That part of the report covers the lodge, the maintenance building, the guard shack, heavy equipment, and vehicles. The outside of the lodge shows signs of deterioration, but the report still gives it 15 years of useful life. Inside, the kitchen needs immediate renovation because it's too small to be functional as a full menu restaurant. The report indicates that the guard shack is in poor condition, both inside and out, due to the age of the building, which is between 40 and 50 years. It needs to be replaced. The reserve study also calls for the maintenance barn and salt shed to be replaced next year with a total cost for both buildings around $60,000. There's good news in that most of our heavy-duty equipment and vehicles are in good shape and have been well maintained. The study recommends an additional $90,000 annually, or $64 per household per year, be devoted to capital improvements. Now, our treasurer, Randy Blaish, will tell you about waste management.
Thanks, Alex. Lakengren Waste Management was created about 7.5 years ago for the purpose of not only trash collection, but also to produce revenue for the association. The Lakengren Waste Management building was built about a year ago with the purpose of protecting the equipment and keeping it out of the elements. Our primary trash collecting truck is a different story. It has only about 2 years useful life left, and we need to be looking into the future to replace it. The cost estimate on a new trash truck is approximately $162,000, and we have currently about 2,000 waste receptacles. The study recommends replacing 50 of those annually. The good news overall is that the study recommends about a total of $30,000 or $21 per property owner to be invested each year. Having said that, this is the one part of the reserve study that we have planned accordingly for. If you read the reserve study and refer back to it, it states in there that we are properly funding for this section of our reserve study at this time. And now with a look at what makes us a lake community, here's our new manager, Joe Overton.
Thanks, Randy. Our lakes are our biggest and most important asset. The reserve study looks at not just our lakes, but the structures around them. The study points out that our docks are in various conditions and that money should be set aside annually for rotating replacement, roughly $25,000 a year. Our dredging is nearly complete and is expected to last 20 years. Erosion is evident in most of our lakes, including the main lake. The study budgets for riprap to prevent further erosion. There are some cracks in the seawall around the lodge, but it's expected to last another decade. The spillways at Catstrup and Valhalla Ponds are both in poor shape. There's deterioration, cracks, and leakage. The study recommends allocating $145,000 for next year's repairs. Our marina building is still relatively new and in good shape. A loan for the spillway will come off in 2023, and that could free up some funding. All told, the study recommends that over the next decade, we allocate an average of $70,000 or $50 per LPOA member annually for the upkeeps of our lakes. Now, with our newest asset, the pool, is Jeff Lane from the LPOA board.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Part of the assessment of the new pool covers its ongoing maintenance and upkeep, and as you can see, the pool itself is brand new. Still, the reserve study addresses some supporting components and other structures nearby. That begins with the bathhouse, which the study says is in fair condition. The recommended expenditures there are a new roof, windows, and siding in the next 3 years at a cost of around $30,000. The basketball and tennis courts are considered to be in good shape. Playground equipment is rated fair and with a suggested $18,000 replacement in 3 years. Now, to pull this entire reserve study together and wrap things up is our board president, Jimmy Gambrell.
Thanks, Jeff. Now that you've heard about the reserve study and all of its components, the question is, where do we go from here? And there's really not an easy answer. I want to reiterate that this report was compiled by an independent firm that conducts reserve studies every day around the country. Its team members were here and witnessed the condition of our assets firsthand. That means that the information contained in this reserve study is completely objective. When you combine the elements of the reserve study that require additional funding, it is recommended that each property owner pay about $510 more each year than the current total of our dues and assessments. This includes $350 more for roads and the remaining going towards our lakes and additional capital improvements. And the $510 is on top of what we already are paying for dues and assessments. In the months to come, there will be a lot of discussion about the relevance of this independent reserve study. Two things are undisputable. First, that's a lot of money. Second, and more importantly, if we do not begin to build financial reserves, we will certainly face more specific assessments as our infrastructure continues to deteriorate. Think of it this way. Let's say you buy a vacant lot on the lake and then build a brand new home. In the first few years, your maintenance expenses on that home will be almost nothing. You won't have to spend money on a new roof, a new furnace, or a new water heater. You won't have to budget a dime for any of that. But eventually, the roof on that house will need replaced. The furnace will go out and the driveway will be cracked. Then you will face major mandatory expenses that may not be in your current budget. And that's where we are today as a community. With the exception of our pool, Lakengren's assets have lasted 50 years, but their lifespan is limited. And now comes the difficult part. What do we do? As a community, we could follow the reserve study's recommendation and implement a $510 increase per household per year. Or we could do exactly the opposite. We could completely ignore the study, keep dues and assessments the same, and cross our fingers that we can get through another year as our infrastructure continues to decline. The third option is to try and find some middle ground where the financial hit is not as hard on each homeowner and builds reserves in higher priority areas. So where we go from here, it's up to you. In the months to come, there'll be more discussion talking about where we go from here and how to protect our property values. We want to hear from you and encourage you to become involved in those discussions. I'm Lakengren Board President Jimmy Gambrell. On behalf of the board and the Finance Committee, we appreciate your time.